الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين أما بعد alhamdulillah, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Last time we met, we had touched on many subjects as normal. Inshallah, we'll do the same, or at least attempt to do the same this week. The Surah Baqarah obviously contains much more than what we could possibly cover on a weekly basis. But we will try to touch on things that maybe are more pertinent to ourselves and the community. Which also, right, there's a lot of things that are pertinent to ourselves and the community. And we are so keen on complaining about the problems of the ummah, so that should be no surprise. Correct? Most of the time that's what we do, is gripe about how bad we are. But it shouldn't be a subject for us to always dwell on. Rather, we should actually look at the positive. And in retrospect, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has still given great good to this ummah. And despite all of their faults and shortcomings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still allows us to, for instance, another month of Ramadan is coming. And we'll see that most of us will fast, most of us will attend the masjid for Taraweeh. But mashallah, most Muslims still take the time out for Salatul Jummah. This is all good things. Yes, a lot to be desired. But if that's still there, we still have a lot of hope. Because good things, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الْحَسَنَاتِ يُذْهِبْنَ السَّيِّئَاتِ. Good things, their nature is that they remove all of the ill things, or the bad things, if we'll put it that way. They remove, all bad things are removed by good things, simply put. So if there's good, we have hope. If there's no good left, then we all might as well throw the towel in and move out to the woods somewhere, become a survivalist. You know the survivalists, right? The people stockpiling years worth of food and building shelters in the bottom of their basement and all of that, right? If you see no good left, then you can join them. You have full permission from the Sharia. So mashallah, go join them. Go ahead and go buy yourself some property out there and become a survivalist. Until that time though, as much as we may see our problems as almost insurmountable, but they can be stopped, they can be helped, and we can definitely help each other. And I think that's part of what I wanted to touch on, because I gave a khutbah in Philadelphia. I've been in Philadelphia a lot nowadays. There was a particular masjid there where people were antagonistic. Let's put it that way. Philadelphia is a different beast, isn't it? Anyone who's from there knows. It's been 15 almost years since I've been gone, and yeah, mashallah. Special place. What can I say? It's the East Coast, and even I was talking to you, we had a meeting with some people yesterday from the community. We met some of these, Christians, interfaith dinner, you know how that is, right? So one of them also, when we were talking about this phenomena of Philadelphia being such a nice place, and he laughed and he said, yeah, even in the whole of East Coast, I don't know if there's a place quite like Philadelphia in terms of just being so in your face and no nonsense, and really it's not too much of a nice place. And the reason why I'm saying that is because being back there, that entire aura, it hit me again. And from both outside and inside the masjid. So I said, okay, it's back home. 30 minutes is all it took, literally 30 minutes after Fajr on Jummah, coming back towards Pittsburgh last week. 30 minutes of interaction with other human beings in Philadelphia was all it took to almost have literally life-threatening situations in the time of 30 minutes span, one after the other. And that's the way it is. So it made me think, and I gave a khutbah about rifq, which is, and now let's think about how to translate this word rifq, like the word rafiq. You've heard that word before? Ra, fa, qaf, rafiq. What does rafiq mean? Any guesses? I mean, you've heard it before. So
Friend.
A friend. All right. Oftentimes, maybe not used so endearingly in Saudi for right people from the Indian subcontinent is always what rafiqi, right? It's almost like. But technically it actually means someone that you're friendly with. But rifq means to be soft, considerate. Literally in Arabic, layn al-jamb, which means to have a soft side, so accommodating. So you can say all three of these things, if you will. Soft, considerate, accommodating. The opposite of unf. Unf is to be all the opposite of things, to be harsh, stern, and very rigid. Okay, so that should be clear. So rifq is to be what? Soft, considerate, and accommodating. Whereas unf, its opposite, is to be stern and harsh and very rigid. They're two opposites. Surah Baqarah covers a lot of topics. It even covers divorce. What's interesting that when it talks about divorce, the words that it uses, because that is, if you would break it all down, what is the worst possible scenario in any social contract? Which is what? Separation, correct? Complete and absolute separation. Because divorce in Islam, there's no coming back except for, as the ayah in Surah Baqarah explains, حَتَّى تَنْكِحَ زَوْجًا غَيْرَهُ, until she remarries and has a complete intimate relationship with that man, and by chance divorces that man, can she return to her earlier husband, or can he remarry his spouse? So it's a pretty big deal, no? Right? In Islam, it's a pretty big deal. If there's a divorce, it's pretty much so final. So it's considered to be pretty serious, pretty severe. Okay? Obviously. But that is, in a social contract, the worst case scenario. You have two people who agreed to be together, and now for whatever reason they want to be completely separated. Can you think of anything worse? Can you? No. Yet, even in that scenario, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for instance, in Surah Baqarah, at-talaqu marratan, he mentions certain aspects of talaq. Some of it, of course, most of it is from, let's say, a very legal point of view. But it's interesting the words that are chosen to explain these things. Like, for instance, this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if someone happened to pronounce 2 divorces. Now, most of you know that 3 divorces make, or 3 pronouncements of divorce would make that divorce final. Okay? Meaning no chance of returning back except for in the scenario that I just mentioned. But 2 is, let's say, well, you got 1, 2, 3, right? 3 strikes, you're out. So 2 is considered a point where this is to be taken seriously, right? Is to be taken seriously. If there's a second divorce pronounced, then that means that this couple really is on the verge. They're on the cusp of ending it. Okay, so now in that case, even what does Allah say? فَإِمْسَاكُمْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ أَوْ تَصْرِيحٌ بِالْإِحْسَانِ. Either you take your spouse back, بِمَعْرُوف. Ma'ruf is an interesting word too, because this is not necessarily something that's delineated by Sharia per se, but ma'ruf is to be considered something that is generally acceptable or generally looked at and viewed at, or let's say looked upon or viewed as by people in that given society as the right way of doing things. Does that make sense? The correct way of doing things. So it's not necessarily a law, it's not necessarily like a shari hukam, meaning it's not like, fard or haram or halal or anything like that. It's more of just a standard that people have amongst themselves, that this is just considered the proper way of doing it. Okay, a proper way of behavior, that's called ma'ruf. So what does the ayah say? Either take them back, bi ma'ruf, meaning what? That if you take your spouse back, even in a situation where you've gotten that serious, it's gotten that serious that you want to separate, if you decide to take them back, then your behavior should be such that what? Everyone would consider to be dignified and correct behavior. There should be no type of grudges or even any further antagonism between the two, but they should kind of make up, right? And then even if you let them go, أو تسريح بإحسان, that even if you say bye-bye, literally tasrih is just to let it all go. Okay, even if you say bye-bye, but you do it, the interesting thing here is, what is Allah? Bi-ihsan, in the best way possible. So if the couple does leave each other, there should be no, again, ill feelings. There should be no, you know what happens in this society, obviously, when people get divorces, it's very ugly. And when you go to court, it just gets uglier. It's all vindictive type of behavior, right? Everyone wants to just get revenge on each other. And even, unfortunately, that boils over even to the children. So unfortunately, it's so bad that people will even use their own children to get back at their ex, as they call it, right? Just as a revenge. I'm going to use the children now as that, as that tool where which I can take revenge on my ex-spouse. So here you see that even if you decide to separate, but you should still separate in what be said, the best possible manner, so that there are no ill feelings even in that situation. Could you imagine? So it's kind of like, to put it this way, again, sometimes if we translate the Sharia without explaining what is intended, sometimes people may think it's crude or it sounds kind of weird. Because in the Sharia, a marriage initially is the same as, for instance, a business contract. Okay, it's a contract between two people. And that's basically how it's understood in the Sharia. So two people make a contract and they agree upon living with one another and having conjugal rights. Got it? Now, in that contract, of course, there are responsibilities like any other business. Is that true or not? If you have a partnership with someone in a business, everyone has their responsibilities. They agree to work together for a particular purpose, and obviously, if it's a business, that purpose is to make a profit. Now, why would business partners terminate that contract? Not profitable. They tried for years and years and years, and just nothing's happening. So in a marriage, it's pretty much so the same thing. There may come a time when a couple gets to that point where they say, well, there's really no benefit anymore in us trying any further because this is just not working. Now, of course, even before you get that point, the Quran also tells us there's certain steps that you have to do. You take someone from your family, take someone from her family, try to work things out on your own, right? Meaning in the family, take all of your problems together. Technically, why am I saying the family? Because some people in their minds may say, well, what if your family is not the best people to intervene? Okay? So you don't have to take it literal. It's not that sometimes it could be the case, right? The family are not the best of people to intervene. But that's not the point of the ayah. The point of the ayah is that the family should normally, in normal circumstances, be your well-wishers. So they, of all people, would be the ones who will want to make things work. Now, if that's not the case, the ayah still holds in its meaning, which is what? Find someone who wants good for both of you, and it will sit with both of you and try to work those problems out that you may have. Same thing again, go back to the example of a business. Business is not working. Before you just totally decide to dismantle the whole thing, people will at least hire someone to come and give them advice. What are we doing wrong? What can we change? Am I right? You'll do something, try and make it work if it's really something you wanted to do. It's the same thing. Now, after all of that, let's say the couple, for whatever reason, it's just not profitable, it's not working. Then even then, the Sharia requires us, as the Quran says, بِمَعْرُوف, or بِإِحْسَان, the best way possible, so that when it's all said and done, if a couple has to split, this could be the worst case scenario in which a lot of bad feelings can remain from not just a couple. In a Muslim society, we know there's more to it, like the families, the kids, everything else, there's going to be bad feelings, correct? Even then, it should be such that there should be no ill feelings between any of the parties. Now, if you look, frankly speaking, in the time of the Sahaba, with one Allah Ta'ala alayhim ajmain, divorce was not uncommon. It did exist in their time. In fact, even Abu Bakr anhu was a divorcee. So it was not unheard of. Most Muslim societies now, and for good reason, right? Abghud al-halali in Allah, as the hadith says, the most hated thing of all things that are permissible in the sight of Allah is divorce. So we're not trying to encourage it, but we're also not Catholics. You understand? We don't encourage it, but we're also not Catholics. If the time comes when a couple needs to separate, because there are times, and that's something that the community doesn't want to hear, because most of the time when I'm spoken to, people always want me to give a talk about the high divorce rates and how we can save our marriages, which is fine, I agree. But oftentimes they want you to kind of just ignore this other part of the extremes that we have, is that we also sometimes often look at divorces as if it's just something haram, or as if we're Catholics, like there's just no recourse to that option at all. Where the reality is, sometimes, unfortunately, there are couples which, honestly speaking, it's just not a good idea. Even according to some of the research that they do in the society. And again, you may say, well, Abdul Hakim, why would you ever use this society as an example? Now, I'm not saying they're right, but even in their own research, they have concluded that sometimes there are couples that, because oftentimes people will use the excuse of things like, for instance, children, right? Isn't that common? There's a couple it's really not happening. And what would they say most of the time to stay with each other, despite the fact that they may be the most miserable people together? What would they say usually? For the sake of the children. Children pick up on that lack of love in the home. So Dr. Omar back in Chicago was once asked this advice, okay, marriages, how do we make it work? He said the secret to making marriage work is love. وَجَعَلْنَا بَيْنَهُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. This is what the divine says as well, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, that Allah places between these couples love and mercy. So the secret to a good marriage, honestly, is love. And love is related to this quality, rifq, to be soft, to be accommodating, and to be considerate of other people, as opposed to being what? Harsh, demanding, all of those opposites. So Aisha radiallahu anha narrated several hadith in this regard that are all recorded in the most sound collections of hadith that we have available. One is in Bukhari and Muslim, where the Prophet ﷺ was reported to have said, Inna Allah rafiq wa yuhibbur rifq. Indeed, Allah Himself is rafiq, meaning He's very gentle, very kind, very considerate, if you will. It's very hard for me to use that word in regards to Allah Azza wa Jal. As I think I mentioned, as is a golden rule of Aqidah, that when we mention the names and attributes of Allah, if some of these attributes refer to things like emotions, then we're not at all in any way inferring that Allah has emotions. So you shouldn't think about it as an emotion, but rather the ghaya, meaning what is the result of that emotion. So rahmah, which in Arabic really means a soft corner in your heart, to have mercy. Now we're not going to say that in regards to whom? Allah. So what would rahmah mean? It means what is the result of that softness or that soft corner that you have in your heart towards someone? It is the desire to do in'am. Okay, it's the desire to do good to that person whom you have a soft corner in your heart for. So then therefore, what would rahmah mean in regards to Allah? His will to be the beneficent or to the benefactor of a particular person. And actually we'll say, as Allah Himself says, وَرَحْمَتِي وَوَسِيَتْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. My mercy embraces all things in existence. And again, another question may come. Sometimes people get confused by these things. Like, well, how is Iblis, for instance, part of this ayah? Because he exists. Understand? Iblis is what he is. Just like any other creation of Allah that He creates that has certain tendencies, that's what they are. Everything will act according to its innate tendencies. So Allah's mercy for those creation is the fact that they exist. So rahmah means the will to give, in this case, all right, to be the benefactor of someone. So what would, if you take that and you understand, Inna Allah rafiq, indeed Allah is rafiq, will we say that He's considerate, like a human being or something like that? No. what would we say then? It is Allah's will to manifest upon His creation softness as opposed to harshness. That if Allah was harsh, if you were to put it that way, then what would be the result of that? Then everyone would be destroyed and nobody would ever have any good. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيَعْفُ عَنْ كَثِيرٍ. Most of the things that we do, Allah simply overlooks. So it is Allah's will, in other words, what He wants is that His creation, He will always treat His creation with kindness, with rifq. So He is Rafiq. That's actually what the meaning of Rafiq, the wazn or the type, the conjugation of it too as an ism, as a noun, it denotes that, just like Rahim, that it is His will to be continuously manifesting His kindness upon all creation. Does it make sense? So if that's Allah, okay, you get the point now, right? If Allah, inna Allah Rafiq, which is again an emphasis, like Bishak, hey, Allah is Rafiq. وَيُحِبُّ الرِّفْقِ. And He also loves what? That kindness and consideration. And what does He love it? Or, excuse me, in what way does He love it to be displayed? In one version of this hadith, fil amri kulli, which means in every affair. Because quite literally, everything you do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves and appreciates when people do things with softness and kindness and consideration, as compared to being rude and abrasive, all of those things. And another version of this hadith, which is even more clear about how and when we should use rifq, the same beginning, inna Allah rafiq, wa yuhibbu rifq, Allah is rafiq, He loves rifq, wa yu'ti ala rifq, ma la yu'ti ala al-unf. And Allah will give through rifq what He will not give through abrasiveness and harshness and so forth and so on. Wa yu'ti ala rifq, or excuse me, وَلَا يُعْتِي أَمَا لَا سِوَاهُ. Which the last part of the hadith means, not just in the case of you doing, for instance, something in a kind and considerate way as compared to being rude and abrasive and harsh. In anything you want done, there is no other quality that you can use other than rifq to get the job done. Does that make sense? So what does that hadith mean? If you want to get something done, the method by which you get it done, He's excluding in the last part of the hadith, there's no other method, in other words, there's no other way of getting anything done except through what? Rifq. You want something done? How are you going to do it? Being rude? Being abrasive? Aggressive? That never works. After all, even if you're a bully, what happens to every bully is eventually the people that they bully get sick of it and what, right? You don't get away with it too long. So, do you get more done by being soft and kind and considerate, or by being rude? Which one is it? Well, what did the Prophet say, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And he's not saying this because he wants to say it. He's saying it because this is the reality. It's related to Allah and His names. If you want something done, you want something to happen, then you get it accomplished by being rafiq, soft and considerate and kind to others, not rude and abrasive and harsh. And it keeps on going, actually. And many other hadith as well. The Prophet ﷺ again said in another hadith that Aisha radiallahu anha, and ajib, this is all coming from who? Aisha radiallahu anha, who is his wife. So who would know better about his behavior? Who? His wife. So what did she say in this hadith? She said that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ الرِّفْقَ لَا يَكُونُ فِي شَيْءٍ إِلَّا زَادَهُ. That rifq will not be found in anything except that it will beautify it. وَلَا يُنْزَعُ مِنْ شَيْءٍ إِلَّا شَانَهُ. And it will not be taken from anything except that it will make it very ugly. So take it even down to material things. What's the difference between silk and wool? Right? What's the difference? Which one would you rather wear? I mean, of course, I know it's haram for men. Okay, that's fine. But the point is, as a material, and if we look at it, we understand the difference between silk and wool. So look at what the Prophet's saying. If something is soft, nothing, meaning there's nothing, la yakunu fi shay, there's nothing in existence that if there's softness in it, then that thing is beautified. But if there's harshness in it, then what happens? It becomes ugly. So again, through their studies, when you see people's faces when they're angry, how do they appear? Very ugly. No matter how handsome or how pretty. When they have that face, when they are truly angry and they're looking with that dour look, do they look pretty, handsome at that point in time? No. When would they look the handsomest and the prettiest? When they smile. So the Prophet ﷺ was described as being da'im al-huzn, which means that he was always concerned, always worried, and always, apprehensive about people in general. Lakin, he always smiled at people. So internally he may have been suffering, but externally he never bothered people with that suffering. He always made people feel comfortable. In fact, some of the companions said to the point that he would give all of his attention, biwajhihi wa kalamihi, meaning he would literally give all of his attention ala asharul qawm, to the worst of people. Not just, important people that you like, but to the worst of people, the Prophet ﷺ would give all of his attention. To the point that that person themselves would begin to think that the Prophet ﷺ loved him more than anyone else. That was the behavior of the Prophet ﷺ. So he was always accommodating, always happy in front of other people, even if internally he may have been suffering. But he never put that burden on anyone else. Take that into consideration and think about these things, that even in the worst case scenario, when people just don't want anything to do with each other anymore, then till even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses words like what? Ma'ruf, ihsan, meaning be kind, be gentle, be good, do things in the best way. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala understands certain people should not be together, that's fine. But it should not be such a scenario that if they do split apart, then now all of a sudden people have grudges, people have problems with each other, and even that affects the children as well, right? So he wants a society and a people whom under all circumstances they behave with this quality, which is rifq, right? To be considerate and kind to other people, no matter what. No matter what. And that is so important because nowadays we have, like I said, we like to complain, there are so many issues that are, of course, all of them are important and they all have to be, tackled in their proper place and proper time. However, one of the things we also suffer from, and I don't think anyone would disagree, this is a conversation I had with Imam Abdulaziz Faraka in his office privately. He said something that I agree with 100%, is that everyone in the modern era, if you want to call it, whatever epoch of time in human history you want to call the modern era, has to some degree has been traumatized. Okay? Everyone. I don't care how well off you are or how happy you think you are, to some degree or the other, you have been traumatized. That 30 minutes that I talked about in Philadelphia, I was joking about it, but really when I reflected upon it, I said, subhanAllah, you see, no wonder everyone in Philadelphia seems like they have post-traumatic stress disorder. Because look, I left the building, there was an armed robbery the night before, and there's a very, if you're from the street, you know what suspicious people look like. There's a very suspicious person sitting right there watching me and watching the door of, and okay, it's the big city, he could have a gun, anything could happen. You see, automatically you're being put in what? Trouble. There's stress. Anything could happen. Then you go to the gas station and there's a guy in a truck who wants to get loud. So, your reaction to, okay, anything could have happened, my window was down, I'm not going anywhere. So if he wanted to start a fight, what could have happened? He could have started, so this is all within a 30-minute, now imagine day in, day out, people going through this. It's funny, I met these young brothers who just, mashallah, all of them are doctors now, they all graduated, they're having like a party, because they're finally done. and they're all in the Philadelphia area. And one of them told me that it's been 13 years now I'm in Philadelphia, I'm not the same man anymore. You know, like in other words, like scarred almost. Like it's just I can't be the same human being anymore after this. All the experiences I had, and I joked with him. I said, yeah, I remember there was some Punjabi brothers who owned a shop in North Philadelphia on Broad Street, which is not the best of neighborhoods. And I used to remember going visiting them, and they had, in the military they have an expression for people who are through combat. It's called the 1,000-yard stare. They've just been through so much that they just have that look like, I've seen it all now. What are you going to bring in? They literally had a 1,000-yard stare. Like that neighborhood is like, I've seen it all now. Nothing means nothing anymore. I don't care. You do whatever you can imagine, whatever scenario you could imagine, I've experienced it. So people go through these things and they experience obviously some type of trauma. Even if you're not in that type of circumstance, the fact that we read what we read every day in the news, especially as Muslims, the pressures that we have, the things that are being said even, this is all creating within us a certain amount of trauma, whether we recognize it or not. Now, what would be the worst case scenario is if when we meet each other, it's Ramadan, mashallah, time is coming. It should be the season, right, where we are more generous. As the Prophet ﷺ, Ibn Abbas described him in this month as being more generous than Rih al-Mursala, which means literally a wind that blew in all directions. Now, if wind blows in all directions, it means that it has no particular preference, if you will. That's the example. That his generosity and his happiness was just everywhere. And this is for the man who I described him, who gave his attention and love to everyone, even the worst of people. But in Ramadan, is even more. It was just everything and everyone possible around him. He was just generous and happy, right? So now we're here, inshallah, bi'idhnillah. What should we do? We're all experiencing this type of trauma. Should we come to the masjid and start the moon wars? Or whatever it is that we have problems with, complain, be mean, right? Start yelling at people, cause arguments, right? Is that what we should be doing? Forget even Ramadan, outside of Ramadan. We're not welcoming to each other. We don't know how to discuss our differences with calmness and with maturity. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala or Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, I think I told you this before, they had a discussion from when they met in the Masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They had a discussion from Isha all the way to Fajr. In other words, all night. All night they were discussing certain issues, but the people who were there present said that they did not raise their voice even once during that entire discussion. They didn't raise their voice even one time. Not once. Now, most of the issues that we fight about, unfortunately, they're under a category of things that at best are speculative, what's called ad-dalilu dhanni. That's why there's differences of opinions. If there were no differences of opinion, then yeah, this may be something that you can yell about, right? And even then you're not supposed to yell about it, because again, what did the Prophet say, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? That Allah gives, وَيُعْطِي عَلَى الرِّفْقِ. If you want something done, how do you get it done? What did the hadith say? Get it done through softness and kindness. وَلَا تُجَادِلُ أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Don't even debate with people outside of your tradition. If you're going to debate and have a discussion with the people of the book, in other words, you do it with in the best way possible. Not attacking people. In fact, even the Quran says that we shouldn't even attack their false gods. Right? Don't do that. So even when it doesn't even matter if it is a alt-right, white supremacist, whatever it may be, you have to talk to even people like that with what? إِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. When ignorant people address them and abuse them, in other words, what do those people who believe say in return? Salam. I don't return tit for tat, as they call it, but I behave with kindness, consideration, and even the Prophet ﷺ said that one of the marks of a hypocrite, and may Allah protect me and all of us, one of the marks of a hypocrite is that when they argue, they abuse other people. When they argue, what do? They abuse other people. They make it very clear that they want it, because this is part of rifq. Rifq is not to hurt people, it is to be considerate. When a person has no rifq, what do? They use words, and they use those words with the intention of hurting those people. And this is, unfortunately, I'm talking to myself first, that we have picked up this behavior, and the trauma that we experience only exasperates the situation. So when we're put into these kinds of conditions or types of, when we don't like someone or like a particular situation, then the immediate reaction we usually have is to do the opposite, is to be abusive, especially towards each other. And by the way, that's another, on top of the trauma, that's also another psychological issue. Malcolm X, rahimahullah, used to write about that a lot. And for the African American, he said, this is self-hatred. It's taught. Right? When somebody else tells you how bad you are all the time, you start to believe it, so you look at everyone else. They've done studies about that too. Like a young African American girl, when she's brought dolls, like Barbie dolls, she'll inevitably, without being taught these things, she'll inevitably pick the white one. It's self-hatred. You see, because someone told them for so long that dark is ugly, dark is ugly, dark is ugly, dark is ugly. So inevitably they just go to what? So imagine, tell me, what do you hear about Muslims all the time if you're watching the news? Or you're going to school, or whatever it is you're right? Muslims this, Muslim that, Muslims. So unfortunately, inevitably too, we develop that psychosis that we're just, self-hatred is ingrained in us. So when we get mad, who we get mad at? Ourselves first. Oh, the Muslims. And even when I said before, we like to complain about our ummah, but oftentimes, if you're looking, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show you that the people you think are so good, like everyone but us, the ghayr, when you take a deep look at them, they're not so perfect. You're praising, like, we have so many problems, all the Muslims are so bad, and Americans are awesome, right? Well, I mean, you've been living here for a long time. Is that necessarily true? No. They're not perfect either. But it's just, again, that trauma and that self-hatred is so ingrained that you don't even recognize that, the good that you have, the good that is there. And why is that so important? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا كَانَتْ لِنَفْسٍ أَن تُؤْمِنَ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. No human soul can believe except with the permission of Allah. So if that person is a believer, there's a reason for it. They may have some problems, no doubt. But underlying all those problems within them, there must be some good. Remember that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about some of the prisoners that the Prophet ﷺ had in the masjid, he kept them there for some time so that they could see the environment of the believers and hear the Quran. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say about them? لَوْ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ فِيهِمْ خَيْرًا لَأَسْمَعَهُمْ. If Allah knows that these people have any good in them, then He will allow them to listen to the Quran and hear its message. Not just listening just listening. You're going to give some person who doesn't even know Arabic and put Abdul Basit on and say, how beautiful is that? And we're not talking, right? We're talking about to the Arab, this means this asma'ahum, it's more than just hearing it. It's what? Yes, listening to it and understanding what the message is. Okay? So what is Allah saying? Allah knows His creation. If there's any good in these people, literally the word in Arabic khayran is, again, it's in Arabic, this is nakira, this is a general noun. And the reason that Allah is doing that is because He's literally saying, if there is any quantifiable good, if there is any good in them whatsoever, then Allah will allow them to hear the message. So think about that for a second. If there are people who have accepted the message and people who reject it, now we'll still give them time. They could accept it. They have all the way until the last moment of their life. But if Allah knows there's any good in them, what will He do? لَأَسْمَعُهُمْ. He will allow them to hear this message and understand it. So, what does that mean? Think about it for yourselves. If someone believes, as the ayah says, no human soul can believe except with the permission of Allah. Someone does not believe, and if Allah knows any good in them, He will allow them to hear the message. What conclusion can you come to? Should we respect other believers or not? Do they have their faults? No doubt. We all have our faults. Right? But there must be something in them which Allah sees and Allah knows. That good that is in them is why Allah has allowed them to believe in Him. There's some hope there. And that's why in another hadith, when a Bedouin asked the Prophet ﷺ, who are the best of people? His answer, the first part of the answer was actually ingenious for many reasons, and we mentioned this before. An-nasu ma'adin. People are like mines. Like mines of precious silver and metals and so forth and so on. And again, you can extrapolate so much from that response, but it goes back to the same subject that I've been talking about now for the past 2 minutes or 3 minutes, is that there is good in them, inherently. But when you go on a mine, you don't just pick a diamond out immediately. You don't just get gold immediately. You don't just get silver or anything else immediately. It first has to go through a process where you get the dirt and you take it out, what they call diamonds in the rough, right? Goes to the process, which interestingly enough, the word fitna actually comes from that process. Fitna is the process that people put, when you put gold through a fire or a furnace to remove all of the impure elements and have pure gold. So if you look at it from that point of view, what would fitna mean? It means it's a test and a trial, not to disgrace you, not to make you to put you through harm, but to do what? Interestingly enough, a very often misquoted ayah, إِنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ فِتْنَةٌ. Your wealth and your children are what? Yes, fitna. Meaning, it's just to see what you're made out of. Allah will give it to you to see what you're made out of. Not in a bad way. Just like the gold has to be refined, you have to be refined. And what better way of refinement than wealth and children? Right? What better way? How do we really know what you are? Right now, you could be pious because, mashallah, there's no problems, right? Let's give you a little bit of money and give you children and see how you're going to behave. Let's see what's going on now, right? Let's see what you're going to do. And when there's nothing there, there's no challenge. The challenge comes when Allah gives you responsibilities. And then the true person comes out. That's why a lot of us would rather not have the responsibilities, right? Easier just to sit around and not worry about anything than to take those responsibilities. And that's why Allah Ta'ala made the issue of marriage, and the ulama called it ad-durura. Durura literally means that it's something that you are compelled to do. Otherwise, what human being would ever go through these things in their right mind? Right? What human being in their right mind would decide that let's just go out and work and have children and do all these wonderful things, right? If you just had to sit around for the rest of your life with no responsibilities, which one would you choose? But Allah compels us, meaning it is innate. We have to do it now. We have no other way. Why does Allah do that? Because it's a fitna. Why is it a fitna? Because He just wants you to bring out the best that is in you. And that's how it's done. And again, it goes back to, so how would you then, and it goes back to the same, this is the other hadith, the Prophet, how then would you know whether this fitna is bringing the best out of you or not? So in another hadith of Tirmidhi and others, the Prophet ﷺ said, أَكْمَلُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِيمَانًا أَحْسَنُهُمْ خُلُقًا. The most perfect of all believers, the one who has the most perfect faith. أَكْمَلُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِيمَانًا. The one who has the most perfect faith is who? Who is best in character. And then the hadith, it's a little bit unfair in one respect. He mentioned only the men. He said, وَخِيَارُكُمْ خِيَارُكُمْ لِنِسَائِهِمْ. And the best of you are those who are best to their women. So in other words, he said, you want to know whether you're passing a test? It's simple. Just take a look at yourself. If you're good to your women, you're passing the test. If you're not passing the test. May Allah make it easy. Because how many husbands will complain all the time about this, that, and the other thing? He said, brother, don't you get it? This is your test. Meaning, again, not in a bad way, in a good way. Allah wants to see what you're all about. And women can tell. That's why when the Prophet ﷺ had literally 9 wives at one time, living in a poverty, an absolute, what we would call abject poverty, they were given a choice. You want a so-called better life? You can leave the Prophet ﷺ. All of them chose the Prophet ﷺ hands down. Why? As women can tell. What could they tell about him? There's no other person like this. There's no other human being. Forget a man. I'm not going to find a man or a human like this. If I go anywhere else, even if there's more money or whatever there may be somewhere else, I can't get what I have here. I'd rather live this life than to go anywhere. So did the Prophet pass that test? Absolutely. Okay? He won the undying love and loyalty of all of those women, hands down. How did he do that? You should think about that. For how was he able to do that? There must have been something very special about him and how he behaved and what he did to others that made them able to sacrifice like that. Am I right or am I wrong? And not just the women folk, even the men. Everyone. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq anhu was a man of honor in his society, a man of wealth, a man of prestige, a man of status, and he sacrificed all of that for the sake of who? What does that tell you about the men? That his character was the most impeccable. إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. And that's why the Prophet told us to. You want to know who's the perfect believer? Those who are best in their character. You want to know who's the best in their character? The best of you who are the best to their women. Now all of that requires what? The fitna. Now of course, obviously, it goes both ways. Huh? Okay, so obviously it's not just the men have to be good and then the women do whatever they want, right? The hadith should not be construed that it's all the men's fault, right? Like if they're bad, then it's all them. I mean, everyone has to contribute, but how do you contribute in general? What is the primary quality that we mentioned here? How do you get things done? Kindness, which includes consideration, right? Instead of being harsh to someone, instead of being inconsiderate to someone and their needs and so forth and so on, then every person should be thinking of how they can be kind, accommodating. Isn't that how every relationship works? If you really want to get things done, you're going to get it done by abusing each other? Will you get anything done like that? No. What did the Prophet say? No. So there's nothing that you can do other than being considerate and kind that will accomplish what you want to accomplish. Nothing. If you want to have something done, this is the way out. So it goes for the marriage, because that is the beginning. The reason why I mention these things and like these ayat about talaq, because marriage is the beginning of it. After that, you have everything other aspect. So you have to have rifq with each other. As I mentioned, like in the masjid, and people have problems and fights and start yelling at each other in the masjid, and then we have these issues of trauma. And our children now also are starting to question too, why am I Muslim? I'm just being honest. This is the truth. Why am I Muslim? So we have to tackle that from different angles. I am a proponent that we should attack it intellectually, that we should teach them their theology and their aqidah from an intellectual point of view so they are confident in what they believe. But at the end of the day, human beings are very practical. What do I mean by that? So I can say things that are very nice and sound good and are even very rational. But if I don't see in practice, what will I conclude? Well, that sounds great, it looks good on paper, but I don't see it. So what I'm trying to say is that even intellectually, if we teach our children to be, confident Muslims from an intellectual point of view, but they're in this trauma, let's put it that way, right? They're being pressured, and then they go to the masjid, and they see us acting the way we act. So what does that do? Because this is all great and fine and good, and yes, it makes sense, but you know what? Every time I come to the masjid, I have this experience, that experience, or every time I go to this place, this cha-cha and this other, or whatever else, this person did this and the other thing, all of that will definitely contribute to pushing them away. It's just going to push them away. The only way out of that is, again, same thing. What is it? Rifq. So in the same chapter, some of the ulama have included the hadith that most of us know about the Bedouin who came in the middle of the masjid and urinated. Right? Everyone knows this. Who doesn't know this story? Now, who can imagine something more crude than that? Right in front of the Sahaba, right in front of the Prophet, that was the Bedouins, mashallah. They just did not care, right? He just came in and relieved himself. So all the Sahaba are like, what could be more? They're ready to jump on him. But what did the Prophet do? Calm down. Let him finish. Again, rifq. This is literally, rifq is what? Is to be considerate. Because it would be really rude right now to stop him in the middle of that and so let him finish, right? Let him out, and when he's done, just go to him and kindly explain to him that you don't urinate in the masjid. We're laughing because it's like almost so absurd to even imagine. Like you have to tell somebody that, You know, imagine if somebody got, like, please, brother, mashallah, don't do that in the masjid, right? Like, you know, there's other places for that. This is not the place. But this is what the Prophet did, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let him finish. When he's done, explain to him nicely that we don't we don't do those things here. Just take that into consideration now. This is a practical thing. It's not a theological issue or something that's theory. It is practice. Right? It's practice. You will get it accomplished. Imagine how embarrassed that person would be after all that. Right? And someone walked up to them nicely and kindly and said, you know, I'd just like to explain to you that it's not really the proper place to do that. Whereas if you just came up and said, what's wrong with you? Then what would the reaction be? And that's why in another hadith that's often quoted but misunderstood, when the Prophet ﷺ said, Adinu nasiha, the deen is nothing but nasiha. Right? Nasiha, it means actually several things are implied at one and the same time. One of the things that is implied by nasiha is to give advice. But also what's implied in nasiha, if I remember correctly, the word in Urdu is khair khwahi. Right? Something like that, which just means what? To be like almost like altruism, right? You want the well-being of the person that you're talking to, you want good for them. So when you're giving advice, it can't just be advice, but it has to be advice that is sincere, because sincerity is also, nasiha comes from nush, and nush means sincerity. So if you don't really like that person and you don't really want what's good for them, it's not nasiha. Okay? It's not nasiha. And sometimes some shuyukh were so insightful about these things that they could recognize the difference. If you give advice to someone, if it's sincere, that advice usually will be taken. But if you're just yelling at someone, what is the result of that? It creates more obstinance in the person. Because we all have our own ego. None of us want to be told that we're wrong and that we're doing something wrong. So if I attack you or you attack me, what is the normal reaction? Who are you? Right? How dare you? I have my own izzah. Is that true or not? You to come and attack me for whatever it is that you think I'm doing wrong. But if you give me good advice and I know that you truly love me or you truly care about me, then what will happen? See, I'll be embarrassed, or at least I'll take heed to it that this person really wants good for me, so I should listen. So that's why even when they noticed some people, one time there was a student of one of the shuyukh, they were scolding people in the masjid about doing certain things that were improper. And he saw them and he called them and he said, when you were doing that, when you were yelling at all these other people about certain things they were doing, at that moment, did you feel that you were better than them? And he said, were you yelling? In other words, were you looking down and yelling at them because you felt that, it was your duty to, go at them? Al-amru bil ma'ruf wal nahyu anil munkar. I got to enjoin the good and forbid the evil. Everyone loves that word, right? So you felt that way? And he admitted that, yes, I did feel that way. And he said, okay, now what you have to do now as a remedy for that is that all the people that come into the masjid and leave their shoes, right, here and there, pick their shoes up and put them on the rack and clean up the masjid and do this. You understand? Like, humble yourself a little bit and keep your mouth shut is basically what he instructed. Don't tell anyone from this point on anything. It doesn't matter what they're doing. Just leave it alone. Because advice is not advice unless you truly care about that person. All that is preaching. Nobody likes preachers. Is that true or not? Nobody likes preachers. And the first thing that happens when you preach is people are going to hold you accountable. That, oh, Mr. Perfect or Mrs. Perfect, you want to tell me what I'm doing. What about you? But if it's advice, the beautiful thing about advice is that even an imperfect person can do it. So even a drunkard can come up to a young man and say, don't be like me. If they're sincere. And you know what they'll do is say, yeah, okay, I won't be like you. Right? Don't be like me, beta, because look at my life, right? Because they're sincere. You see, if you're sincere, they won't point fingers at you. You understand what I'm pointing at? Because they know you really mean it. So it's like, yeah, I should take that advice. But if you're not sincere, if you're just preaching, then everyone will look at you and say, okay, well, let's see what you're all about. You're so perfect, mashallah, that you want to come and tell us. And that's why, for instance, Shu'aib alayhi salam, when he was giving advice to his people, he told them that I don't want to tell you to do something that I don't do myself. وَمَا تَوْفِيقِي إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. And there is no ability to do good and bad except from Allah. Meaning that what is he trying to tell them? If he's a prophet, even prophets, you understand what I'm saying? Even prophets who are divinely assigned by the Creator to warn other people, but even he had to clarify that I'm not trying to tell you to do something I don't do myself. Why? Because when you tell people to do things, again, you become now what? Right, like they're going to look at you and they're going to say, okay, you're the one telling us to do all this? What about you? Even prophets, think about that for a second. So what about us, who are not the prophets, meaning we're not protected from sin, we have errors, we do a lot of things with us. Well, what would be our case that if we go in front of people and we say, you do this, you do that, you do the other thing, then automatically people are going to look at you. That's why bichara, the imams have the worst position. Because they're supposed to be perfect. Why do they have to be perfect? Because they're telling everyone else, right, on the minbar, that this is Islam, so everyone looks at them like, okay, they can't make any mistake. Which is the furthest thing from the truth, obviously, but like, and you understand? That's why they have the worst position of all. Because once you have that position, everyone's looking at them, okay, that's it. No mistake can be made. They are not human. They're malaika, right? Which is not the truth. And so even for imams, even for shuyukh, the intention should always be nasiha, not preaching. Nasiha is advice. And advice goes both ways as well. So the person who gives it is the one who hears it first, in actuality, rather than the people who are listening. Okay? The person who gives it is the first person who receives it before it even goes to anybody else. Because after all, even before I say it, I'm thinking it, correct? So anyhow, khair. Whole idea here is just to kind of hopefully encourage all of us, and again, the advice goes to me before any of you, that rifq and softness, kindness, and to be considerate of other people is the way that we can accomplish every goal that we want. And there's no other way, actually. It's really what the Prophet ﷺ said. There is no other way to accomplish your goals except through that, your consideration and kindness towards others. So inshallah, really need to consider these things when we talk to each other, and especially in that regard when we're giving advice, because this is where you see it more prominent, right? When we're fault finding with each other, we have the worst things to say, the most even dehumanizing people, to be honest with you. So this sister, there's a couple not too far from here who are, mashallah, they both accepted Islam. May Allah accept them and make it easy for them. So they called and she was all distraught because, she read certain hadith about there was a man that's basically in Sahih Bukhari, in Kitab al-Hudud, in the chapter of penal punishments. There is a man who was caught drinking publicly. So this is the part she didn't understand. She thought that he was just caught drinking somehow and then he was whipped or beaten. Okay? The fact is that you can't intrude on people's private lives. If they're behind closed doors, if they're drinking, fornicating, or doing whatever, that's not your business, honestly speaking, right? And even if you catch them, you cannot say anything. And there's another example of that what you give later on in the time of Umar. He actually went into somebody's home and found them drinking, and he had dancing girls too. He was having a party. And Umar said, I got you. I said, yeah, Umar, if I did something wrong and you did a couple things wrong, you're intruded in my privacy, you're eavesdropping, and you're trying to find faults. And so Umar said, you're right. Let me go. And he didn't say anything. Umar, who was the Khalifa at that time. So later on the man came to them and said, Umar, since that evening I didn't do these things again. And then Umar said, since that evening too, I never told anyone about what I saw. So you don't have the right to intrude on people's private life. So this didn't happen because this person was doing it in private and someone else came, I caught them. And so Allah said, look, this guy right here, he drinks. It's not like that. Understand, this guy was a public drunk, which means that he was an alcoholic, number one, and he habitually used to drink in public and was drunk in public. But two things to remember, because she was like, it seems so harsh. I said, okay, forget certain things about this narration. There's actually 3 narrations in that chapter. 2 of them from Abu Hurairah, 1 of them from Umar ibn Khattab, radiyallahu anhuma. is that one thing is in one narration it said that this man used to make the Prophet ﷺ laugh. Because of that, he used to do these antics. He used to, do things that were amusing, and the Prophet he was so amusing that even the Prophet would smile and laugh. So what does that tell you? Think about it for a second. What does that tell you? Did he remove the humanity of this person? No. The Prophet actually found him to be an amusing person, meaning that he had some love for him. No. If he looked down on him and thought he was just the worst person in the world, would he be laughing at him? Not at him in the sense of, at his expense, but meaning that he thought he was amusing and funny, meaning that there's something there between him and the Prophet ﷺ. So when he was punished, narration of Abu Hurairah, and then the narration of Umar ibn Khattab, and the narration of Abu Hurairah, when people were hitting him and beating him, someone actually said, may Allah, literally like, yukhzik, which like, how do I explain this? It kind of like, may Allah disgrace you. And the Prophet ﷺ heard this and said, do not say things like that. Do not help shaitan against your brother. Meaning don't dehumanize the person that even though they did something wrong in public, again, this is not a private sin, something between them and Allah, they are publicly displaying behavior that had to be reprimanded. Correct? Yet even in that, what were they told? Don't say these kind of abusive things towards him. You're going to help shaitan. We don't dehumanize people and we don't treat people any lesser. We behave with rifq. All right? We should be considerate. This person has an issue. This is addictive behavior. You're not going to cure it by doing what? No, you're disgusting. Look at you, you're no good. When you do that, ask any psychologist out there. If you did that, what would it be the result of that? Would it improve their behavior or make it worse? Worse. They say, oh, so I must be so bad, who cares? Nobody loves me. So the Prophet ﷺ reprimanded the other companions and said, don't say things like that. Don't help shaitan. And in another version of the hadiths, so the Prophet ﷺ actually said that So Rasulullah actually mentioned in the hadith that was narrated by Umar ibn Khattab that when someone abused him, that the Prophet said that I know he loves Allah and His Prophet. Okay, so again, the Prophet doesn't say these things because it's, he just wants to. وَلَا يُنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. This is a divine reality that he's revealing upon people. Meaning, despite this man's problems, despite his personal issues, this man loves Allah and he loves his Prophet. So leave him alone. Okay? You understand? You should not become vindictive, abusive people towards each other. It doesn't accomplish anything. Even when you feel like in this case, this person had to be reprimanded. And he was, wasn't he? He was punished. But even in that, you're not allowed to do what? You're not allowed to dehumanize people and to put them down and to make them feel any worse than they probably already do. Because if he loves Allah and His Prophet and he's being punished like that, you think he doesn't feel it? You think he's not embarrassed? You think he's not ashamed of his actions? That it's such a habit that he can't even hide it. He can't even do it behind closed doors, right? He's already probably embarrassed and feels ashamed. Why would you want to make it any worse? And that's what the Prophet ﷺ said, do not assist shaitan against him. Don't do that. So this is, mashallah, how can we forget these lessons and use the type of language we use towards each other and be the way we are towards one another, that even people whom the Prophet ﷺ knew they were hypocrites, he wouldn't do anything to them for the sake of what? If I do something to them, then everyone outside of us will say, oh, look at how Muhammad ﷺ treats his companions. See, again, this is ingenious because this creates, as I said before, the environment that, oh, Islam sounds great, Muslims have a point, but look at what they do. to each other. If I become Muslim, I can expect the same thing. Whereas Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala complained that in his time the Muslims were so generous and so, mashallah, we still, for the most part, the Muslim world still has that generosity, right? At least that much is still there. But like he would say, they were so generous and such good people that people would become Muslim just for that. Just to take advantage of that fact. And I become Muslim, mashallah, there was a lot of people, believe it or not, there are books written about this. There's more people than they like to admit in the times of, let's say, the 17th to the 18th century, Englishmen and Frenchmen and Dutchmen who became Muslim, and they were called renegades. In that time, the Europeans used to call them what? Renegades. One of the primary factors that drove them to Islam is that Europe at that time was still very much so there was a hierarchy. You couldn't go any further no matter what your abilities were. If you remember your history, that's why Napoleon was supposed to be such a big deal, because that's after the French Revolution, where they destroyed the hierarchy of the church and the king, and now Napoleon, who came from a poor family, no background, could become what? The emperor, and lead France to victory. You understand? That was a big thing for Europe. Before that happened, that wasn't the case. If you're not from noble lineage, if you're not from the church or these, the hierarchy that was established, you really couldn't go anywhere despite your abilities. Reason why they became Muslim, a lot of them, because they saw the opposite in the Muslim world. Then in the Muslim world, they didn't really care too much about where you were from. It was all about if you had talent, then you could go forward in life. If you had talent, you could go forward in life. You could be something as compared to Europe. Imagine that. So there was a time, that's what the Ummah was. Like, they were so generous, you had so many opportunities, you had such good behavior. Even in business, we have examples in front of us, practically the largest Muslim country in the whole world, Indonesia. How do they become Muslim? Through business. Even West Africa, Mali, Senegal, all of these countries which are dominate, more than 90% Muslim, they also became Muslim through business, through trade. The Muslims were just that, mashallah, had that much integrity, right? That they said, this to us is a sign of impeccable behavior. There must be something to this. Let's become Muslim. Ajib, right? So I'm just saying this just to make us think for a second. It's time Ramadan is coming, and everyone usually focuses on fasting, right? Taraweeh, reading the Quran, mashallah. But what is really the purpose of fasting and reading Salat al-Taraweeh and reading the Quran? Is it to become more abusive? Induce more trauma in the Ummah? Right? Cause more issues? Or is it actually to do the opposite? To become softer, to be like Rasulullah as Ibn Abbas described in that Rihun Wasala, to be like that wind that just blows in every direction. And be so good, it's almost annoying. Right? Almost annoying. Like, people would almost get sick of you. Like, enough. Because people had to tell the Prophet that, you know that, right? It was an order of Allah to the Prophet ﷺ, whoever asks you for something, give. So he was never allowed to refuse people, even when he knew that people were taking advantage of him. The Sahaba would have to ask the Prophet ﷺ, we know that such and such a person is just asking you because he knows he's going to get it. Now sometimes the Prophet ﷺ, as a teacher, he would give certain examples to people. One person asked for something, and instead of giving that person something, he gave him an axe and told him to go to one of the outskirts of the city of Medina, to the forest, chop down wood, sell wood in the market. This is better for you than asking people for things. So yes, every once in a while, but he never said what? No, get away from me. I don't have anything for you. You should be ashamed of yourself. Right? Instead, he just showed him this is a practical way. Better to be self-reliant, even if it's just chopping wood, than to ask people for things. But again, the point is that the companions at times even had to stop the Prophet because they knew this person. Some of the companions even admitted it. I just asked because I knew he was going to give, and I just wanted to get something from him. I didn't need it even. I just wanted it. So I said, oh, Rasulullah, can I have this? Can I have that? Like kids, if they know that you're going to give them everything, oh, Baba, oh, Mama, this. And it was like how they were with him. So again, let's try to make a niyyah at least to be like that and to practice these things. It is all a fitna, meaning, again, what does it mean? Test. In what way though? To bring out the best in you. To see how you're going to react and see what you're going to do. And the key to all of that is, as the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is all about having rifq. Be kind, be considerate. You'll get everything you want accomplished. Everything. Inshallah. So I guess we will stop here and open it up for questions, inshallah. If there are any. Straightforward, I guess. Yeah, I was going to bring up other things, but we'll get into that later. There's some. One day we'll talk about riba. Give you a heads up. Riba is actually what they say in the Quran is what's called mujmal. Mujmal is a technical term that describes a word that's used in the Quran that is used in a way that it's not clearly defined. You know ijmal? Have you heard ijmal? Ijmalan. What does that mean? Concise or in general. So you're not defining it particularly, but you're just giving a general ruling. So it's kind of like I said, all you guys. Is that precise? Is that, or is that what? General. Precise is when I start naming people. Okay, you by name, right? So if riba is mujmal, because the word in Arabic literally means just ziyada, increase. In fact, that it's used in that same meaning in the Quran. وَيُرْبِس صَدَقَات, from the same root word, from riba. Yurbis sadaqat, meaning Allah takes sadaqah and He does what? He increases it, increases the reward, in other words. So if riba means to increase something, and then Allah says, وَحَلَّلَ الْبَيْءُ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَا, He has made bay', buying and selling and trading, halal, and riba, haram. What was the big question there? Why do people buy and sell and trade? To make a profit, right? To increase your wealth. So then the Sahaba were now stuck. Because of the way we understand the word in Arabic, riba, it means just an increase. So what is Allah talking about here? What's riba, in other words? Why is that an interesting discussion? Any guesses? No? Because now you have to find out through the efforts of ulama, there has to be an effort, an ijtihad, in other words, to find out what constitutes riba and what doesn't.
So what's the difference between riba and usury? Like,
there you go. You see, it would make questions like that come up. Can we define, in other words, usury as riba? Okay. And the answer in this case would be yes, because we'll get into that, inshallah. But even in that, there's further discussions, and it goes even further than that, because usury, how it's used, when it's used, all of this. Why can we discuss it to that detail? Is because riba is not a clearly defined, the word itself, it's not clearly defined. So it leaves some room for what? Interpretation. What is and what does not constitute usury, or not usury in this case, interest. Right? So it's a scholarly discussion. Same thing with the, we talked about this ayah about khamr, right? So the word khamr in Arabic, again, this is the opposite of mujmal. This is what you would call, it's mufassar, or it's something that's clearly defined. How so? Because the Arabs had more than 200 names for alcoholic drinks in the time of Jahiliyyah. In any language, the more words you have for particular things, the more you love it, right? So they had 200 something words for horses and 200 something words for, right, alcohol, okay? Because that's what they did. war on the horse, and drinking. So, khamr, let's put it this way, you have 200 something words you could use. You only use one. So if I have a choice of 200 something words in my vocabulary and I only choose one, what would that tell you? I'm being very specific. I'm referring to something, a very particular thing. So al-khamr is a alcoholic beverage that is made out of grapes, raisins, or dates, specifically. You know, they actually had ajib, qahwa, coffee, right? I remember when when I was learning Arabic, he got on my case about this because, I don't know how true this is, but I know that he's right in one way, that qahwa, coffee, actually was used in the times of Jahiliyyah too to make an alcoholic beverage. So you can actually make alcoholic content out of coffee and it can intoxicate. So he said use bun. Bun is another word for coffee in Arabic because that's the modern word for qahwa in the old days. They used to make a wine out of it, right? So khamr is made out of what? Grapes, raisins, dates. You got that, right? Why is this important? Because alcohol in English, what does it refer to?
Ethanol.
There you go. Now this chemical can be processed from how many things? Right. Keep that in mind. Following my frame of thought here? Okay, so if you think about that for a second, khamr is very specific. It is only an alcoholic beverage that is made from grapes, raisins, dates. Anything else would not be included in this definition, correct? So if it's wheat, anything, like it's the hundreds of things out there that you could use to make ethanol, that's not included in this definition. Okay? So then you have another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, Kullu muskidin haram. Every intoxicant is haram. Now let me ask the second question. Is every alcohol an intoxicant? Is it? No. Not every alcohol is what? An intoxicant. So if it's not khamr, and if it doesn't intoxicate, but it has alcoholic content, then what? Yeah, as long as it's not khamr and it doesn't intoxicate. And this is a lifesaver because like me personally, I love eau de perfume, you know. And if that ruling wasn't there, then I'd be stuck. I can only use, some people are really strict about it. I want oils, I want the oils. So that's wonderful, but like I like perfume too. And if this wasn't there, then that's it. Can't use them either. Why? Because they have alcoholic content. But is that alcohol that they use? First of all, is it manufactured to drink? No. Is it an intoxicant? No, actually, it's a poison. Right? If you drink it, you're probably gonna. Right? It's not so. The point being is that you see, this is the ingenious of our scholars and how in the past they used to understand these things. Right? So even in the old days, there's narrations where the Umar anhu used to make juice. In those days, how would you make juice? They would also put fruits in water and just let it sit. Same way that you would make wine. So they just let it sit, and then after a while, he would take it as kind of like an energy drink. You know how they sell them now? I'm like,
So by that interpretation, if you have these food products that have alcohol in their ingredients, that's okay because this is not an intoxicant?
Yes, if it's not, that's the key word, if it's not an intoxicant. Meaning if the alcoholic content is not originally something that intoxicates. But if it's something like rum or beer, which has been made to the point where it is an intoxicant, right? So like if you take something, if you're nitpicking and you take something and you like to a laboratory, you say it has this much amount of alcoholic content, right? But it's not an intoxicant. Then what would we say about that? It's what you just said. It's okay because it's not an intoxicant and it's not made out of these things, grapes, raisins, or dates. But if it's wheat or barley, like what they make beer out of, right? Now they made the beer. The problem with that, why is a beer not halal? Is because that has been made with the specific intent of what? Intoxicant, right? To be an intoxicant. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So that would help with so many things, like people wouldn't have to worry about cough syrup, for instance, and or whatever. There's different things that people can kind of like relax on a little bit. As long as it's not an intoxicant and it wasn't made with that purpose, it's okay.
What if it's used in a manner not to intoxicate?
Right.
For example, beer battered fish.
Oh,
Yeah, okay.
it's still beer. Even though they're not, that's the whole point. It itself is an intoxicant, correct? But even if you're using it for a purpose other than that,
If it's diluted.
yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
But it doesn't it evaporate?
That's what people say.
Stuff in whiskey and all.
Then you just have to ask your heart. No, I better you stay away. Yeah. That's of course, if we should even bring up riba, I don't know, maybe we'll just leave it up. Yeah, bring it up, okay, inshallah. Bismillah. I mean, obviously, because, you know, in our society, really, I mean, honestly, are you really going to avoid it 100%? So you're gonna have to find some ways, you know, within the Sharia to kind of understand where and when we can take a little bit of a rukhsa. Sure.
So, but Dickinson, one question, like what about the human emotions? Like let's say towards Jews or mushrikeen or whatever they are doing to the Muslim world.
Right.
There are some human emotions that you cannot control. I mean, you don't want to look down on them,
Right.
but still you feel angry sometimes.
Sure.
So are you supposed to suppress them and just…
No. Even the Prophet ﷺ, again, like that's why we always have to take things in a holistic way and look at the picture honestly and truthfully and not be apologetic. Even the Prophet was ordered by Allah, وَقْلُذْ عَلَيْهِمْ, like be enraged. Okay, so anger has its place and to be upset it has its place. It's just that you don't allow it to control your actions to the point where you become vengeful and vindictive. You don't hate the people. You hate the injustice or you hate the idea. Not the people, you hate the ideology, but not the people, right? Because after all, the people can change, right? So there's so many examples of that, but you do, if you're not angry, and that's part of the key of all of this, if you're not angry, you will never stand up for the truth anyhow. It's anger that motivates you to protest, motivates you to speak out, motivates you to stand up against bullying and oppression and all of those things. You just can't take it to the point where it becomes… See, the problem is now we don't know the balance. We become so victimized and so much trauma that we react. And again, it's very human in certain ways. Like I'm not saying I don't understand, I'm not justifying the actions of people. Like even the example I gave, like Philadelphia, because the reason why I'm saying that is because of that. I don't blame people growing up in that neighborhood for wearing a hard face all day and ready to beat you down or shoot you in a no one's… Because everyone else is doing that. What are you going to do? Right? I mean, it builds up on you. You can't just walk around there and be like Gandhi or something, right? Like, oh, everyone, you know, I'm so nice, and people will take advantage of you, right? Someone asked me this question from Philadelphia after this khutbah I gave. He said, well, brother, ever since I moved here, he was from Pakistan, and people were being so this and that, and they're telling me I'm too soft and too nice. Unfortunately, I forgot to tell him, but it's almost like in this context, you kind of have to act this way. Why? Because if you don't, yeah, they will take advantage of you. You need to put on a little bit of a, you know, don't mess with me type of thing, because they will take advantage of you. So there's a time and place for everything. But in general, what it means to be considerate and nice is that you don't allow that anger to control you to the point that you become vindictive and you become vengeful and you become the type of person that allows your rage to go to the point where you go over and above and beyond what is necessary. Perfect example of that is a story almost all of you have probably heard of, Ali radiallahu anhu. Who can tell me? When he's on the battlefield, he was about to chop somebody's head off, and then the person spat on his face, and what did he do? He stopped. Because now this is personal, right? That's what we're talking about. Okay, that you don't want to get to the point where it controls you and become a vindictive type of person, and that, you know, it's just misplaced. Anger has a place, but we have to know when and where it can be used. This is all discipline, is it not? If you really think about this, this is a very strong discipline. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ and the companions were so impressive to people, because they saw these things. Even in my own life, I saw people that, of course, are not like that, but you know, when you see them in action, when you see people doing these things, it impresses you. So I knew someone who was very dear to me. They went back to Pakistan, but he was a beautiful mashallah. He was imam in Philadelphia for years. He's Bataan too, so you know. So I remember once during Eid in Harrisburg, he used to be imam in Harrisburg, and there was a crowd and people rushing, and he's trying to, you know, tell people where to go, and people were being rude, of course, you know, on Eid, and people were. So I bothered him with something that really was not important. I said it was not the right place, the right time, and I knew I was being troublesome. When he first looked at me, I could see the anger. Like he was ready to tell me off, and then he just stopped and smiled and said, just do that. Like, you know, the way he did it is because he controlled that emotion completely. It really impressed me because I know he would, and he was right to tell me off. You understand my point? Like, I was being dumb. I deserved whatever scolding he wanted to do, but he just stopped it, and he just put that smile on and said, just do this. Like, really? That, you know, if that hits you, because you know that's a real, he wanted to be angry. He had the right to be angry, but he stopped himself. That's a discipline. That doesn't come easy. And again, advice to my own self, because I've gotten in trouble too for my anger. I'm from Philadelphia, unfortunately. That's the thing. I'm used to that immediate, trust me, meeting guys like that in the gas station for me is not easy. I want to talk back, and then I just, okay, I did say something to him. See, that was good for me. I called him an animal. May Allah forgive me, right? But that's good for me, because the normal reaction would have been something different, like, you know, okay, right? But you learn. You have to discipline yourself at this time, at this point in time. What should I really do? Should I react? Should I get angry? Should I insult this person? Should I start a fight? What's the real answer? No. So how should I? You understand? So you discipline yourself through years. And then finally, you may get to the point like that teacher I had, you're angry, and you just put the smile on and say, okay. That's it, but it's a discipline. None of this comes easy, but to answer your question, being human, having anger, it's all part of the deal. It's all part of it. And you shouldn't get rid of anger completely. You just have to learn how to control it. Because without no anger, then we become cowards, we become pushovers, all of those things. Those are all negative. So we don't want to have the absence of anger. We control our anger. وَيَشْفِي غَيْظَ قُلُوبِهِمْ. Even the Quran says this about the Sahaba, that in the battle of Badr, Allah cured the rage that they felt in their hearts. Do you understand my point? When they had that was justified, right? All the abuse and all the things that were done to them, when they got back at the Quraysh, Allah said that Yashfi, like it was like a cure for them, that they were able to take that revenge. But again, it was very, quality control, like it was controlled, right? They didn't go overboard and when people want to take revenge, just look at any other situation in any other type of combat situation, right? Normally, when people don't have that kind of consciousness, what do people usually do when they in that tense situation and they're being abused or something, in danger even? What do people normally do?
That's what Hind did, right?
Oh, that was, she was just out of complete control. She's eating people's livers for crying. I mean, that's like, that's like, she's just, she's just, there, and that's what happens. People do that. Even, that's, of course, an extreme example because she was that hateful at that point in time. But, even like, for instance, in the Vietnam War, they had incidents where there were war crimes. And a lot of times the reason why they happen is because these young men are put in a situation where they just got shot at and they don't know who shot at them. And then they're in this village and basically the tension and the anger is so much that they just shoot anything that moves. And sometimes they find out, was it just an old lady I just shot but was trying to run away? Because it's that's you have to, it's a discipline. The only thing that's going to keep a young man from doing it at that time is that they have to really be conscious of what? Of Allah, of God. Despite I can't do that. So this is a discipline, and it's a worthwhile discipline though, because there's nothing more rewarding, as the Prophet ﷺ said, more than fasting even, this Ramadan again, more than fasting and standing at night, a believer's good character has more weight on the day of Qiyamah than these things, because discipline, that's what it takes. Great work. Great work. May Allah make it easy. Inshallah. Inshallah.